But, Tom, thanks for joining us and taking the time. Good morning.
What's up, John? How you doing, Dan? Thanks for having me. Merry Christmas.
Hey, Merry Christmas to you. And I want to start off with this loss to the Buffalo Bills, Tom. We've been taking a lot of calls today, talking to a lot of people who feel that even though the Patriots lost that game, the fact that it was a close loss was a check in Jerod Mayo's column to staying around for next year. Do you think that's the case, or do you think it didn't even rise to the level that his job was really in jeopardy in the first place?
I agree with the latter point more, but I do think it was by far the best game that they've played, believe it or not, or the most you could draw the most from this since probably the opening game of the season in terms of things to feel okay about. You know, I think that we could all agree that the second half was almost inevitable. We did a halftime live on NBC Sports Boston. I said, the final score is probably going to be 28-24 Buffalo. And I think we could all agree that eventually Buffalo's talent would win out. But I think the circumstances of the game, given how poorly they performed in Arizona, really flatlining, and the mistakes that they made with penalties, with breakdowns. We still saw some of those against Buffalo, especially with the long run. But I just think the climate around the team and in the week leading up to the Buffalo game and going against a team that had scored 90 points in the previous 2 weeks, to show signs of life defensively, to confuse the MVP frontrunner in Josh Allen, to perform well enough offensively, to show some more aggressiveness in different junctures. I think all that's true. As far as the fact that Jerod Mayo was on the hot seat, it's interesting. I kind of feel as if that was a media creation based upon, hey, is Mayo on the hot seat because of the results and where things have gone so far this season? But there was nothing really ever articulated by the Crafts that they expected anything more than they were getting. So, but once he spoke after the Arizona game, I think that ready-made, custom-made hot seat he was kind of placed in, and that's not inaccurate. I think that was such a discouraging performance that it really changed the landscape, and I think the Bills game changed it back a bit.
Tom, with the understanding that Jerod Mayo's seat may not be hot at all, would you extend the same thing to the two coordinators where they should also be off the hot seat in our eyes? I
wouldn't. They have to scrutinize so much of the coaching staff, I think, because it's not just, hey, everybody's new. There's no development with so many different positions. Again, we can be cowed by the fact that Marte Mapu had a really, really good game, for instance, but he was a healthy scratch the week before. Jalen Polk was, I think, trending toward being a healthy scratch before Jabril Peppers was unable to go. Javon Baker is still catchless on the season. So these are positions and these are sides of the ball that really deserve a lot of scrutiny going forward. The defense in DeMarcus Covington was hamstrung by the injuries primarily to Bentley, absence of Peppers, the one to Barmore. But I still look at that group and say it should not have declined as poorly as it did, even though they had the brain drain of losing Steve Belichick, losing Mayo's full-time attention, losing Bill Belichick as an overseer of the defense. The development still was not certainly what you're looking for. And then offensively, I just think there seems to be a disconnect. To me, it was eye-opening last week to hear Alex Van Pelt saying, I just don't want to run Drake Maye. And the Patriots, whether it be Mayo, May, or Jonathan Kraft shaking his head in the box, certainly are registering a level of dissatisfaction with where the offense is, despite the development of May.
So, Tom, to build off that, you mentioned Alex Van Pelt. I mean, he, I think, was largely an Elliot Wolf guy from previous time in Cleveland, and the roster is Elliot Wolf's purview. When you look at the uncertainty, per se, around Van Pelt, around some of the additions that have been brought in, you mentioned Javon Baker, and Jalen Polk's been a big disappointment. Do you look at Elliot Wolf and say, hey, there might be an issue there, or do you look at it and say, hey, he inherited a really poor roster, and this is going to take multiple years for this to really get better?
No, I think that he should absolutely be scrutinized probably more than anyone else in terms of guys who were elevated this offseason, Mayo included. I mean, he was part of the player procurement along with Matt Groh when Bill was here, and we can still say, all right, well, Bill was the final say, but there was so much made in 2021 about the collaboration that was going on in that draft. There was in the 2022 draft. It basically whiffed on virtually every player in that draft. And the last two drafts, they haven't yielded very much. So to me, Elliot Wolf, between the free agent signings, you got Hooper and Antonio Gibson as the height of success. You got Chuks Okorafor, you got KJ Osborne. I'm probably missing other individuals right now as well. And you just have to look at it and say, what exactly are they looking at in terms of projections for what guys are going to do? Because I'm not seeing identities that are laid out. When this player gets here, we're going to do X, Y, or Z with him, and this is his plan to succeed.
Tom, to stick on the offense for a moment, specific to the quarterback, how would you describe the place in development where Drake Maye is, both in the physical talent throwing the football, but also in his decision-making after a couple of plays from Sunday's game he may want to have back?
Yeah, it's really a great discussion because we got into a spirited one after the game where Michael Hawley said, well, why is Drake Maye given so much latitude and let off the hook so frequently in his first year when he makes mistakes and Jerod Mayo isn't? And to that, I would say you got a guy who's had 7 turnovers, 7 consecutive games with turnovers. And you can say, okay, well, the Kayshon Boutte interception last week, he basically lateraled it to a cornerback. But there are myriad bad decisions mixed in there. I think it's a growing pain type of situation. He's 14 touchdowns and 10 picks. He does so many demonstrably good things on a week-to-week basis that if he wasn't out there, they'd have no shot of being competitive in these games, that it's easier to excuse those. I think he has exceeded fairly high expectations. And Mayo coming in, I think the people were skeptical about his performance and his readiness for the job. And I think that he has about met that level of expectation. So as a result, that's what my answer was. Why does May get so much more latitude? I think it's because you understand that a 22-year-old first-year quarterback with 25 college starts is probably going to throw it to the other team occasionally, and he has done that.
So, Tom, I want to follow up off that because I think the biggest issue the Patriots offense has had is probably their offensive line and protection, but the next biggest is turnovers, right? They're -9 turnover differentials, 27th in the league. If they didn't turn the ball over against Buffalo, or even if they once instead of 3 times, maybe they even win that game. And I take your point on May being young and growing pains, but beyond May, whether it's Stevenson fumbling, the receivers not hanging on to passes that lead to picks, is there anything that can be done in these last couple games or going forward even into 2025 to limit the amount of times this offense is turning the ball over? It's killing them week in and week out. Mm-hmm. And I'm wondering if there's anything that can be done besides just get new players to limit that.
I mean, Stevenson is a tremendous player. I just think it's a focus issue with him on occasion. That fumble was not off a tremendous hit. And on the next time he was in the open field, he again had it away from his body. You know, they have this saying, as you guys probably know, 5 points of contact. There's 5 different places that you should be contacting the football, between your hand, your forearm, your bicep, your chest, whatever else is involved in there. And he's not running like that. And to me, I think that's a focus thing. He knows he ought to. He's a very productive player. He looked like Earl friggin' Campbell when he took it in on that drop down, or the run for his touchdown against Buffalo. So to me, it's details. It's guys perhaps trying to do too much on different occasions or losing focus. And I think it kind of goes back to the previous coach. Do your job. If your job is to carry the football and make sure that you end the play with the ball in your hands, well, that's what you're looking for.
Tom, on the offense as well, from a wide receiving perspective, there's kind of a lot of spare parts that have been put together either through the draft or free agency. Are there guys on that wide receiving unit that you see as long-term pieces, and how drastic could the change at that position look like this offseason?
I think Demario Douglas is definitely a long-term piece. I think Bourne will probably be back for another year. There's relevance there. And I think Kayshon Boutte is, a productive enough receiver certainly we've seen that, and I thought that he was, and I thought that he was last year too. He's got tremendous body control, excellent hands. He was in the doghouse last year, and he's emerged as a guy who is fairly dependable. He's a 3 receiver. At best, a 2 if he continues on an upward arc. But to me, Jalen Polk has to be on an extremely short leash going into 2025. Going back in time. Because you're looking at a player who has done nothing. It's not a redshirt year. It's your rookie year. You're a second-round pick. You played a lot at a successful college. People thought highly of you, and you've done absolutely nothing for 5 months to improve. So if you have to say you go the Duke Dawson direction with someone like him, or Cyrus Jones, say, look, it's just not working, we're moving on, then you have to move on and get better at that position. What's so hard about getting better at that position is whether it's draft or free agency, it's really hard to extract good players from the wide receiver position in free agency. Even if T. Higgins hits the market, which he may not even do, he's still going to be so expensive. Is he going to be a $35 million a year player? Is he worth that? Or you just say, we got to pay the price, we stink, so we have to get wide receivers in here? My feeling is the best way to find a wide receiver is via trade. And we've seen that work in different places. So that's where Elliot Wolf has to be innovative. I think the best players who we project as free agents generally re-sign with their teams. So the Patriots have to create something in that market.
He is Tom E. Curran of NBC Sports Boston. Tom, really appreciate you taking the time on this Christmas Eve, and have a great holiday and rest of the week.